it's so tragic. Like, left it all out on the floor. His last game, gave everything for this team. It's like, yeah, he gave everything and he received nothing, basically.
Right.
His coach will get paid another year. He's gonna have to go find a job.
Which side are you on? Which side are you on?
Bradley Alsop is a producer on the Emma Sports Vigeland Network, ESVN, and we're going to talk to him about some sports stuff. Let's talk about the NCAA, because you don't get 2 to 3 years in the NFL from nowhere. You get 2 to 3 years in the NFL because you have spent 21 years of your life playing this really hazardous, dangerous game in, little league and middle school and high school, and then at the NCAA, where at that level, these are like grown-ass men throwing around 200-300 pounds of weight. People at my church growing up, we stopped playing tackle football when we got to be 16 years old, and some of us were 200 pounds, and we started breaking bones. We were like, okay, this is a bit much, right? But these people in the NCAA, they're keeping on playing it. They're making their schools millions of dollars, and up until a few years ago, they weren't making anything. And I sent this article to you from, the source is pretty lame. It's a right-wing, media outlet in Alabama. But they were talking about Saban's opinion on name, image, and likeness. And Adam was, and maybe it's just because I don't know as much about like what's going on in the sports world. But when I read this, I was like, what the hell is, Adam said that Saban has actually been a lot better on this than some other coaches, but I'll read a little bit from this article for folks, and then I'll get Brad and Adam your reaction to this. Several high school football coaches recounted Saban's comments, including one where a representative of a possible high school recruit asked for $800,000 in NIL money from the university, and that didn't go over well with Saban. Quote, "I told him he can find another place to play. I'm not paying a kid a bunch of NIL money before he earns it," unquote, Saban was reported to have said. Saban also referenced a player that was no longer on the team due to NIL payment issues. Quote, "One of them wanted $500,000 and for us to get his girlfriend into law school at Alabama and pay for it. I showed him to the door," unquote, the head coach reportedly said. And it's like, talking about, I'm not going to pay this kid money before he earns it, this is the paternalism in these comments to me were just infuriating, because these aren't kids playing a game. These are, as we define them in the United States, adults who are earning millions of dollars for the University of Alabama. And you can say or not whether this or that one is worth $500,000 or $800,000. But the idea that this person, who is the highest paid public employee in the state of Alabama, making tens of millions of dollars a year, and, no doubt he's worth it. But the idea that somebody is acting so indignant about somebody asking for what they think they're worth, it's just like, it really hit me the wrong way. But Adam, you said that there are coaches who are way worse than Saban.
Yeah, the one that comes to mind is Dabo Sweeney.
Yep.
Brad, I don't know if that one comes to mind as well, but he's just, oh man, he's had a lot of really paternalistic kind of talk about this. He's been very, I think, antagonistic to the entire concept of players receiving money, period. Saban seems, as he has over the course of his career, adaptable. And that is how I'm perceiving Saban, is that he is kind of adapting to this new world. The thing about this NIL that I think is worth really distinguishing is that for all these years, these college athletes have been functioning like employees. They have created tremendous value. I mean, and just as an example, Oklahoma and Texas are trying to leave to go to the SEC.
Yep.
It's what, $100 million that they are spending to leave 1 year early, just to change the types of teams that they play, right? Just change their affiliation in the conference, get on different TV stations. All this, they want to move 1 year early. They're willing to shell out $100 million to do this, most of which is going to Fox, the TV network, in the negotiations. But I mean, that's the kind of money we're talking about. Tremendous wealth has been created by these college players. And all this time, you know, they have been restricted from what they could actually earn. A few years ago, and Brad, you may know more about this than me. I know several years ago, Northwestern University football players attempted to unionize.
Yep.
It was rejected. They were deemed not employees. So, but the push for some kind of player compensation has really, really grown in recent years, especially as we know more about the risk involved with football. And the NCAA had this brilliant idea of, well, we're not going to compensate the players. The colleges don't have to compensate the players. We'll just let people fill in the gap, right? And rich boosters can show up and create collectives of name, image, and likeness. And, you know, Billy Joe's car dealership in Tuscaloosa can sponsor. And that, you know, I don't know if you have more to speak on that, but to me, it was like it was a brilliant trick that the NCAA has played, right? Because now some players are getting money, so some people can be happy with that. Some people are bitching and moaning about that. But at the end of the day, NCAA and the colleges themselves are continuing to reap the benefits of these players sacrificing without an employee status.
Yeah, so before I get into that, because I have a lot to say about, you know, the dynamics at play there with the NCAA, but I just find it interesting that Nick Saban wasn't worried about earning his contract before he fucked up being on the head coach of the Miami Dolphins in the late 90s, and early 2000s. He seemed to be totally fine with getting that money straight up before proving that he could be a good NFL coach. And when it comes to Dabo Swinney, the head coach of Clemson, he is a evangelical right-wing freak. And he once said a few months ago at a press conference that the players and him have been participating in the name, image, and likeness game for a long time because they play with the name and image and likeness of the Lord in mind when they play. So,
Lord bless me as I hurt these people.
Right. It's a really neat trick for Dabo Swinney to employ, that he's this leader of men who like makes his players really faithful. But, you know, don't step out of line if you want a sponsorship from like Checkers or something, because that's a little too that's kind of arrogant before the Lord. This idea of being so sanctimonious that your players that are essentially indentured servants in this economy of college sports are kind of being audacious and a little inappropriate if they want to make money. And yet then on the other hand, that same person with those feelings can be literally, as you said about Saban, Jacob, Nick Saban in Alabama. Guess who is the highest paid public employee in South Carolina? It's not their governor. It's not even Shane Beamer, the coach of the University of South Carolina. It's Dabo Swinney at Clemson. So seemingly fine with a handout from the government there that's fully guaranteed, but nothing else for his players. So that's also what you have to remember when in terms of all of the laundering of these guys' images when it comes to coverage of these guys and their teams on ESPN or things like that, is no one wants to really acknowledge that they continuously will fuck over their cheap labor with zero recourse or without a second thought, because at the end of the day, their bag's never messed up. Their check's always clear.
Right. It's like we were talking earlier about the whole Jimmy Dore situation, a power imbalance.
Right.
There's the power imbalance here is significant.
I mean, could you just imagine for 1 second, like thinking about a union trade union apprenticeship program where the director of the program is like, I don't know about paying this guy, $20 an hour. I don't know if he's earned it yet, right? Like you just don't. And we're talking about the same people. We're talking about the same people, whether, they're 18 years old going into a trade union apprenticeship or they're 18 years old going to play for a D1 school. These are people that are working. These are people that are creating value. And in the case of the latter, people working for, an NCAA D1 school, some of them are creating millions of dollars of value, like an ironworker apprentice isn't going to necessarily create $1 million of value in his first year. Right. But their directors aren't complaining and acting all indignant and paternalistic about them saying, or about paying them. It's just so insane to me.
And with that in mind too, the other thing is that I think is a common misconception, and not necessarily like, I don't think there's as much of this when it comes to college athletes, because there's a little bit, it's the narrative isn't like, oh, like you're so entitled that you get to play. Sometimes there's a little bit of that for like basketball players at D1 schools, like you're so entitled, like you got a free ride, like you got you basically just go to school to be a basketball player. Like there is sometimes that type of rhetoric, but there's also on the other side of that the sanitizing rhetoric of, look how much these guys play just for the love of the game. Like they play for the love of the game. All they get out from it is just victory, these intangible aspects of the game, just winning, like overcoming odds. Like there's so much valorizing and narrativizing and sanitizing for, like, for example, March Madness, where it's like all of these guys coming together for some of their last rides to really prove themselves. And there's, with the underwriting veneer, obviously, that literally none of these guys are getting paid to play directly by the NCAA. A lot of them are essentially, with respect, they're nobodies. They're not going to be, not every player from Mercer College or from North Carolina A&T is going to get a walk-on or going to get a draft spot in the next NBA draft.
Right.
These guys, once these games are over, either they have another year at school or they're done playing. They're forever. They are not. Right. They are done playing. Their college basketball careers and basketball careers, period, are over. And with all of that being said, that's never really discussed from a labor perspective, or it's discussed from a sports perspective. That it's so tragic. Like left it all out on the floor his last game. Like he gave everything for this team. It's like, yeah, he gave everything and he received nothing basically.
Right.
He gave it all, and his coach will get paid another year. He's gonna have to go find a job. And the other things when you think about that in the jobs context is, I bring up all of these perceptions because sometimes I don't think people understand that college athletes, from the football players, basketball players on down to the crew team, badminton players, anything, take your pick, water polo. These are 7-day-a-week engagements,
yes,
obligations. You are practicing, you are watching film, you are working out, you are in team meetings, you are strategizing, and then you play a game, and you are traveling for those games when you are not home.
Right, the type of courses you take, the scheduling of your courses, the degree that you major in. I mean, all of it is shaped by that experience.
Exactly. It is not outside in sports to academics. The academics surround your time as an athlete.
Right.
It dictates your entire life. It is not something where it's like, oh yeah, like I'm a college student and then I go play basketball on Saturdays. It's right. I'm an athlete and I have to be in college as well. And people will think that maybe I just got this free ride, I don't have a course load or whatever, but yet I'm also doing this work that a English major is not doing at all.
Right.
And I'm getting no money for it. I'm getting no for the value of my labor, with all of the TV rights that schools get, with all of the revenue streams that they get within their conferences, because every school in a conference gets a piece of the pie from conference television network deals, like SEC network, Big Ten network, ACC network, and also when those games from those conferences make it onto major networks like ESPN or one of the big four networks, they all get a share of that pot. The commissioners get a share of that. The boosters, the boards of trustees get a share of that. The athletes don't.
Yeah.
And so it's a lot of work. It's a similar thing that like it is in the big four sports leagues. but it's almost more cartel. It's more cartelized, and I don't. I'm maybe making that word up, but people sometimes it's almost a cliche now when people consider the NCAA as a cartel. But if I'm a massive national conglomeration of corporations and superstructures of like different conferences with different teams and different commissioners and different members, I am just a multi-tentacled organization that exploits my labor to make money. What is the difference in the structure than the bosses getting a kickback from everything else that their middle managers are making for them by exploiting the people below them who are also almost like the corner guys selling for them, for example. Not to take that metaphor too far, but it's essentially it is a structure where the value is created at the bottom and it only sifts upward.
Right.
The profits only get maximized. The people doing less of the amount of work receive a larger share from the people actually doing it.
Yeah, absolutely. And this it's so, and I used to hear some of what you were talking about, like from people watching. I think, like you said, a lot of this rhetoric has died down, but about like how lucky they are.
I mean, it's something I've emphasized on the show before is that at least for me growing up in the South, if I ever heard anything about unions on the news, it was probably on ESPN, right? It was probably in the sports section of the newspaper. I mean, it is one of the most high-profile labor management relationships, that of the professional athlete, and it's one of the most high-profile set of unions, the NFLPA and all of the player unions. So I appreciate you kind of breaking that down and talking through that with us. I think there's a lot to dive in there, and I think more and more people are waking up to the reality that these folks are workers, that they are performing labor, whether they're classified as amateurs or professionals or not. So, my personal hope would be that these players can organize, and there's hints of that already. Now, whether they would say collectively bargain with a school or perhaps on a conference level, all that, it's hard to say where it's all going to go. But, that would be my thoughts, is that through organization is going to be the best means for the players to actually have some security, have some safety, have some, longevity in their plans. Because I'm sure, as we see right now, some folks are going to be able to get some money. But how equitable is that? How structured is that in terms of real working conditions and like the impact there? There's a lot that needs to be addressed. And so I would encourage the players to organize, and I think it's incumbent on all of us in the labor movement to, lock arms with them as fellow workers and bring them into the movement.
Yeah. You just saw a clip from the Valley Labor Report. We are live every Saturday morning from 9:30 a.m. till 12:30 p.m. And we pride ourselves on keeping all of our content free to everybody so that we can talk to as many working folks as possible. If you support the work that we're doing, you think that it's important, you think that it's good, then consider making a monthly contribution to the project, and you can do that on our website, tvlr.fm.